Good morning, everyone, and welcome into episode 13 of the Wake and Take. It is Wednesday, and yesterday was the final day of the tampering period. Later today, the NFL season for 2023 officially starts, meaning some moves have to happen. Some more moves will happen after 4 p.m. Every NFL team has to be under the cap, and they have to work out deals with all of their restricted free agents before 4 p.m. today. So today's show, we're going to be talking about that. We're going to be talking about all of the moves from yesterday. And yeah, it's going to be good stuff. It's going to be good stuff. Let's go ahead and get on into it. All right, so just to break the fourth wall a little bit, this episode is pre-recorded, so I know tons of you are watching here live, dropping comments, I hope. I'm not going to be able to engage with you today, unfortunately, for all of you guys, but luckily for me, I'm going to be boots on the ground at the UGA Pro Day today with our very own Carpentier NFL. So if you want to stay tuned on what's going on in Athens at UGA for their Pro Day, make sure you're following the Roto Underworld Instagram at Roto Underworld. I will be posting stuff over there for sure, as well as Cody posting stuff on his Twitter at Carpentier NFL. It's going to be good stuff. I'm excited that I'm going to have that opportunity to head over to Athens to watch the Pro Day, to meet all these great athletes at UGA. It's great stuff. I'm excited. So all of this stuff has happened. It's 9:40 p.m. Eastern here in Atlanta. And still a lot of news from today. So if anything happens after that, I'm sorry. You'll have to just go check out our amazing Twitter at PlayerProfiler at Roto Underworld. Whichever one it is. I don't know why I can't remember right now. But great stuff over there. Anything I would have missed is definitely on that Twitter. As they do a fantastic job. Jack is doing great stuff over there. Aaron's doing great stuff over there. Everyone on the Twitter team doing fantastic work and getting all of the news reported to you. So I'm ready to give you some reactions to what has happened today for me, but yesterday for you guys. So I mentioned at the beginning of the show that teams have to get under the cap. So as of now, the Seahawks are $2.6 million over. The Saints are $2.5 million over. The Rams are $1.7 million over. The Giants are just under $500,000 over, and the Bucks $228,000 over the cap. All of these teams are going to have a couple more moves come in before 4 o'clock for sure. Probably more than likely going to be restructuring, especially for the Giants and the Bucks, since they're under $1 million to free up. They'll figure that out with some other players. The Seahawks and Saints and Rams, they might have to cut someone, but I would imagine they also work out some sort of restructuring. And it'll be okay. You know, the salary cap isn't real, as they say. So these 5 teams will have some stuff to work out before 4 p.m. today, and I'm excited to see what they do. It looks like for the most part, a lot of these big moves have happened. I will later at the show kind of preview some of the players that are still free agents as of now, of course. And before that though, let's go ahead and recap some of the biggest news from today. Or from yesterday for you guys. So Alan Lazard officially signed with the Jets. He's signing a 4-year, $44 million contract. I think that officially means that Aaron Rodgers is definitely going to the Jets. He is going on the Pat McAfee show later today. I believe it's like 1 p.m. or something, an early showing, to talk about, I guess, himself and what he's going to do. And I'm sure he's announcing that he's going to the Jets with Pat McAfee. And so Alan Lazard, the first domino to fall. I don't think much really changes for him. He's still going to be a reliable target for Aaron Rodgers. I don't think much changes for Garrett Wilson. You can have 2 wide receivers on an offense. That's totally fine. I do think we'll probably see a move involving Elijah Moore at some point. You know, sometimes you've got to be careful what you wish for. And Elijah Moore was not careful what he wished for. And well, he's probably going to get traded. You know, he asked for it last season. It didn't happen. But now they're bringing in a Hall of Fame quarterback. He's going to get moved out. More than likely. That's what I'm assuming will happen. But if not, then, that's still a really good receiver core. As we know, Sauce Gardner said that there's going to be a package deal to bring in Aaron Rodgers. I don't know if it ends at Alan Lazard. I know that Aaron Rodgers sent over a wish list of wide receivers, that Alan Lazard was on it, Randall Cobb was on it, Odell Beckham Jr. was on it, so we'll see if that happens. I doubt it. I doubt a man can get his entire wish list. But the fact that they're signing Alan Lazard to $44 million over 4 years says a lot. They're committed to get Aaron Rodgers to New York. It's definitely better than the Broncos getting Nathaniel Hackett, thinking that that'll do enough to bring over Aaron Rodgers. But I think Alan Lazard definitely is, on top of Breece Hall, Garrett Wilson, and just the rest of the good team that's around them. So I think that that's happening sooner rather than later. From the words of Aaron Rodgers' mouth on his little podcast about the darkness retreat, we are going to have that decision, I think, very soon, at the very least, end of the week, but probably today on the Pat McAfee Show. Andy Dalton has signed with the Panthers. He's going to be a backup quarterback, presumably, or he's going to be starting for a few weeks and commanding the Carolina Panthers. Interestingly enough, this is per Ahan Rungta on Twitter, our boy Ahan. He tweeted out that Anthony Richardson to Panthers odds dropped from plus 700 to plus 300. So more than double the odds. I don't know how you would phrase it, but or less than half the odds. More. It is more likely now that in the eyes of Vegas that Anthony Richardson is going to the Panthers. I'm assuming that they see that Andy Dalton will go in and start for a few weeks or the whole season even, and Anthony Richardson will be able to develop. That's what these Vegas odds are telling me. But of course, CJ Stroud is still the favorite to go to Carolina. It is definitely interesting that those odds have moved in such a way. We never have the answers. It's crazy how tight-lipped these NFL teams are. It really is. This draft day is going to start with fireworks for sure, with whatever the Panthers choose. And hopefully, I'm an impatient guy for the most part, and I hope the Panthers don't take who the Texans wanted, because then we could just have a bang, 1-2, and then go on to the rest of the draft on day one. I think that'd be more exciting than waiting the full 10 minutes for both of these teams. But it doesn't really matter in the grand scheme of things. The Anthony Richardson odds, though, they've dropped, which is just, I think that's interesting to note. I've said a lot of times on the show, Andy Dalton sucks. And he does. The fact that there's no wide receiver core as well is not going to help him. I really don't know what the Panthers are doing. Tank commanding makes sense, but then, you're not tanking for Caleb Williams if you end up drafting a quarterback here. So I don't know. I think he probably is better suited as a backup because he knows so much. He's been in the NFL so long, and he was pretty good at one point. So these odds have dropped, for Anthony Richardson, which definitely means something. I'm not quite sure if it really means that they're going to go the Anthony Richardson route or even the Andy Dalton full season route. I'm going to have to ponder that a bit more. I'm definitely going to have to ponder that a bit more. But, like I said, CJ Stroud is still a favorite, and that's personally still where I think it's going to happen. I think it's going to be CJ Stroud coming in. Matt Ryan. You want to know about Matt Ryan? He was released. I'm a big fan of Matt Ryan, so it sucks to see his career end in such a way. I think the only team that may take a chance on him now would be Tampa Bay. I know they need someone. I don't think they really want to throw out Kyle Trask to start the year, but they might. And if they do, Matt Ryan's still a good backup if he's not a starter. That released by the Colts, though, freeing up a decent bit of money. And I assume he's going to test free agency. I haven't heard any rumblings about him wanting to retire. And in fact, I believe I saw something that he wants to keep playing. So we'll see. I think he deserves a chance. He's Matty Ice after all, former MVP. Who cares if he threw so many interceptions last year? You can't assume that that's going to happen again. You can't assume that's going to happen again. I'm just going to be in denial about the decline of Matty Ice, the melting of Matty Ice for as long as it happens, just because I like the guy. You see my Atlanta background. You get it. You guys get it. The Eagles, they are bringing back James Bradberry after all. We had thought that they were basically going to lose their entire defense, which they have. But they are bringing back James Bradberry, which is an important piece. We'll see. Darius Slay did want to leave. We'll see what ends up happening with that. At the very least, they have James Bradberry now. It's a 3-year, $38 million contract. It's pretty hefty. It's pretty good, and he deserves it. The Eagles did, however, after losing TJ Edwards yesterday, lose another linebacker in Kaiser White. He's going to the Cardinals with former defensive coordinator Jonathan Gannon. And they're losing everyone. They are. They've lost Javon Hargrave. They've lost TJ Edwards. They've lost Kaiser White. They're probably going to lose Chauncey Gardner-Johnson. And it looks like they're still going to lose Darius Slay. They're losing a lot. We're going to see now Jordan Davis, of course, get a little bit more snap share, which is good. He's a good player, great player, super athlete. But this Eagles defense is going to be taking a massive hit next season. And it's going to be hard for them to repeat the way that they have before. Or to repeat in general. I guess they haven't repeated before, but winning the NFC East is going to be difficult. We talked about that on yesterday's show. Winning the playoff games in general, making it to the Super Bowl is, of course, always difficult, and it's more difficult without a good defense. So I wish they would have been able to figure it out. At the very least, we're talking about good fantasy implications, as Jalen Hurts is going to have to put the team on his back even more than he did last season. With this defense not being so good, they're definitely not going to get 70 sacks again. You can guarantee that. You can write that in Sharpie. Speaking of the Eagles, also, they are replacing Miles Sanders for sure, and that's going to be with Rashad Penny. I think that's a good signing. He is, when healthy, a pretty damn good running back, and we've seen some flashes of him. So to put him on a good offense where he doesn't have to do as much, they're still going to use Kenny Gainwell, and they did re-sign Boston Scott. I think that's a great landing spot for him, and it's going to increase his fantasy value, which makes him a little bit more difficult to buy. But it still might be worth it because he's going to be at least a fill-in, a good flex start every once in a while. I mean, he's going to score some touchdowns easily. And he's going to, get 50, 60 yards a game probably, which is, decent. That's decent. And maybe more. It's very possible he has a Miles Sanders-esque season. It is a great offense that runs the ball plenty. So I'm going to set the sights high, and if it changes, it changes. But we've seen good things from Penny when healthy. So if he can stay healthy all season, I don't see him being anything worse than a flex at the very least. So I like the signing for them. I don't think it means too much for Kenny Gainwell. Rashad Penny's not the best pass catcher in the world, so I think he's still going to get those snaps. I think anyone that was expecting Kenny Gainwell to go over a 40-45% snap share, that was a lot. That was asking for a lot from him. So I think the signing makes a lot more sense. Bringing back Boston Scott makes a ton of sense for the Eagles. And I just think it's good things all around. I don't think a step is going to be missed at all. If anything, Rashad Penny might be better than Miles Sanders, really, at least when healthy, fully healthy. So that's the Eagles. They've made a lot of moves, and we'll see how it impacts them. It looks like for sure that defense is going to be really rough next season, for sure. The Cowboys, they've made a move. They traded for Stephon Gilmore, great cornerback here, on the sunset part of his career for sure, but the Colts are getting a 5th round pick for him, which shows how far down the line we are in his career. But still, he had a pretty decent season last year. Say decent, and I think it'll pay off for the Cowboys. He's going to go great alongside Trayvon Diggs, and they're going to need it. Like we said, the NFC East has some pretty good offenses. You're going to have Stephon Gilmore on. You'll have Stephon Gilmore and Devontae Smith and Trayvon Diggs on AJ Brown for the Eagles. It's not like the Giants have the greatest receivers, but Isaiah Hodgins is still respectable. And Wan'Dale Robinson, we'll see what happens with him. I think can be pretty good. So, again, a pretty decent receiver core. The Giants did trade for Darren Waller, which we'll talk about more in a second. But yeah, the Colts cornerback core getting a little bit of a help with Stephon Gilmore. I think that's a good trade for them, and only having to give up a 5th round pick is fantastic, even if he is nearing the end of his career. The Commanders, they have released J.D. McKissic. It's true. It's happening. It is Antonio Gibson's season in Washington. If you want to see a really great discussion about Antonio Gibson, go into the Trade Gods. It was 3 weeks ago now. He was my buy candidate with Matty Kiwoom, and maybe even 4 weeks ago. It was a decent bit ago, but I love the guy. I really do. And I think he's at a very good price point. He's outside of the RB20, I believe, maybe even outside of the RB30 in our rankings right now. And I think that we're going to be seeing a really, really great role for him next season. Think Jerick McKinnon plus, to be honest. He just set career highs in receptions, receiving yards, and I believe receiving touchdowns as well last season. He's an explosive runner, great profile, great pass catcher. I remember week 1 last season, he had great sideline catches, just toe dragging and stuff. So he's a great receiver. I think Eric Bieniemy has recognized that already and knows that, and that's why they've released J.D. McKissic. We'll see if they also end up releasing Curtis Samuel. I know Jack Kavanaugh is expecting that to happen. We talked about that on Trade Gods because Jahan Dotson was his buy candidate, and they can free up $10 million by releasing Curtis Samuel, which is a pretty good amount of money to free up when you're cutting a wide receiver 3. So if that happens, then we're really, really talking about Antonio Gibson. But at the end of the day, too, I think that owning both of these running backs is decent enough in fantasy. I know Brian Robinson's not the best in the world, but he's still a between the tackles grinder on what hopes to be a pretty decent offense. So, 10 points a game kind of thing from him, nothing crazy, but I think that's about what you can expect. Probably about 10 points a game for each of these running backs, to be honest. splitting the workload a decent bit with Antonio coming in for the explosive pass catching plays and maybe some like outside runs and stuff. And Brian Robinson getting the bulk of the inside carries and early down work, which is totally fine. It'll be like Isaiah Pacheco and Jerick McKinnon, but Antonio Gibson's better than Jerick McKinnon. At least I hope so. At least I hope so. I think Antonio Gibson is a very good buy in fantasy for those of you listening, and I think he's going to have a great season in 2023. Austin Eckler, while we're speaking of running backs, yesterday we talked about how he had requested permission to seek a trade. Well, he was given that permission by the Chargers. I get it. If you listen to yesterday's show, I get it. You know, if you're not getting the money that you want, you're going to walk out of town. You're going to leave. And that's what he's trying to do. We'll see what kind of offers comes in and everything like that. I do think with running backs, you are more likely to see them move after requesting a trade. Last week, I compared it to Deebo Samuel, who didn't end up leaving. I think since, the Chargers have given him permission and running back is fairly replaceable, he's probably gone. Which definitely I think sucks for his fantasy value. I think it does. I think there are certain teams that you can go to and still be productive, like the Bengals, say, if they are moving on from Joe Mixon, which they have every right to and seem to be doing from if you're reading all the tea leaves correctly. So I think that would be a fantastic landing spot for him. Outside of that, I mean, it's going to be tough sledding for him to get the exact kind of usage that he was in Los Angeles. If I may impart some manifestation here, if he does leave, I would love the Chargers to bring in Leonard Fournette for my personal feelings. I have him just still on a team because, he's fine. He's totally fine. I'm not going anything more than just fine. But if he ends up on the Chargers, he's going to be pretty damn good. He's going to get plenty of usage in the passing game, and I'm going to be excited about it. But obviously, that's just me manifesting it. That's me wanting it to happen. That's not true analysis on what would happen. But I think that would be a good way to replace Austin Eckler. And then there's also, of course, as I talked about yesterday, Jerick McKinnon is still technically a free agent. So that's someone that they could bring in, or they could just address it in the draft. It's a decent running back class. So we'll see what the Chargers end up doing. It looks like they're moving on from him. It looks like Austin Eckler is moving on from the Chargers. It looks like it's a mutual agreement to part ways. Sad to see it happen. He's been really good for fantasy. Really, really good. And it seems like it's going to end unless he ends up on the Bengals, which I think would be fantastic. I think that'd be great. Speaking of running backs, tons of running backs today. Yesterday, Jeff Wilson and Raheem Mostert are back in Miami. They've re-signed them both. Mostert, of course, is coming off the best year of his career, 891 yards, 5 touchdowns, averaging 10.5 fantasy points per game. He played 16 games. Everyone was expecting him to be broken for at least half the season, like usual. But no, he played 16 games. And kind of similar with Jeff Wilson. They're basically the same running back, although Mostert definitely has a much better profile. It just seems Jeff Wilson outperforms his profile. When you see him on the field, he is much speedier than like a 30th percentile across the board athlete. Still, similar stats from him, 860 rush yards, 6 touchdowns. I will admit half of that came in San Francisco. He had 486 yards and 2 touchdowns before being traded for a 5th-round pick to the Dolphins. But still, I like when teams use the same running back, right? They're not going to skip a beat at all. They're going to bring in Wilson. They're going to bring in Mostert. I think we're going to see plenty of the same thing that we saw last year. Mostert had a 55.9% snap share. Wilson had a 52.7% snap share over the year. Towards the end of the year, though, Jeff Wilson did have above 60% in the last 3 games of the regular season, and that only went down to 57% in the playoffs. So it seems he will probably have the lion's share, given he's a little bit younger than Mostert, but still, I think both will at the very least be good DFS options for value, and will be flex fill-ins every once in a while. If either of them gets hurt, they become an RB2, RB3. They're explosive runners. We know it. Mostert averages like over 5 yards a carry in his career. Wilson has looked really good when he's played, even if his profile doesn't look that great. And again, if either one of them goes down, they're going to be fantastic options, either one of them. And they're probably totally fine, decent, okay options when they're both on the field. I think they'll both, get 8 to 11 carries a game and 40 to 80 yards, and then they could break one. So I like it. I like that move from a front office standpoint, and I like it for those players. They don't have to be used a ton. They get to keep tread on the tire. And again, from the team, they have 2 different running backs, but they're the same running back. So good for them. They get to run the offense that they want to. And that's the Dolphins running back. The running back core. Michael Thomas. Funny enough, seems to just never leave. Slant Boy just seems to want to keep playing football. Well, he's resigned with the Saints. It's a 1-year, $10 million contract, and you get $5 million more in possible incentives. I like the incentives move a lot because it's a risk to take him on. $10 million is honestly a lot of money for a risk, but I mean, if he comes back and performs and plays at least half the season, it's a win, assuming he plays at the high level he has before. So it's a good move for the Saints. It helps that wide receiver core. Michael Thomas, Chris Olave, Rashid Shaheed. I think that's very decent. And then Jawan Johnson, of course, is a really good tight end, a really athletic tight end. And I think that could work well with Derek Carr. Yeah, I think that's a pretty decent offense. I really do. And we'll have to see though if Michael Thomas even ends up playing more than 4 games. I think that's where the true line will be drawn in the sand of if that's a good move or not. I think $10 million is a lot to risk, but worth it if he does end up panning out. Lamar Jackson, more on his drama. He was offered a pretty decent contract. It was $133 million, fully guaranteed, but the big thing was that it was only over 3 years. And I assume he wants a little bit of a longer term contract, but that's averages out to about $44 million per year, which would make him the 6th highest paid quarterback in the NFL by salary per year. I mean, that's about right? Patrick Mahomes making more than him, Deshaun Watson making more than him. But still, I mean, like top 6 quarterback in terms of pay, that's not bad. And it's fully guaranteed. So he probably just wanted a little bit longer, like 5-year contract kind of thing. But still, it seems like the Ravens don't want him to leave if they're offering that kind of contract to him. We'll see if anyone actually sends in an offer sheet for that non-restricted franchise tag. I don't think they will, but if they do, that's basically they've written the contract for the Ravens because they will probably match anything that actually comes in. I don't think they want him to leave. But I mean, tweeting about it though, it's a bit much. It's a bit much, I think. I mean, that's I would get it if it was like they were paying you like the 10th or 15th most paid quarterback, but I mean 6th, and you've got the fully guarantee that you've asked for. And it's, I mean, like, what are you gonna do with $100 million? What are you gonna do with it? So at some point, I think you've got to figure out what you're doing. Like if you want to play for the Ravens, if you want to play NFL football and you want a fully guaranteed contract, $133 million fully guaranteed over 3 years is great. And if you end up playing more after that 3 years, you're still going to be paid highly. So just accept that. I think that's what I would do. If I were his agent, I would tell him to do that. But he still has some leverage too. So I just don't think it's as disrespectful as he's making it out to be. I think that's a fine offer. Speaking of fine offers, this is the most fine offer I've ever seen. Giants are trading their 3rd rounder to the Raiders for Darren Waller. And you can call me crazy, but I think that's a solid move for both teams. I really do. The Giants get to take a gamble on a truly elite tight end when healthy, and they need the help. They really do. It's a fine core of weapons. It's fine. But bringing in Darren Waller, if he's healthy and can produce at least 12 games, then it's worth it. The Raiders, on the other hand, it works for them too. They don't have to take on that risk of a 31-year-old tight end who hasn't played a full season in 2 years. They don't have to take that risk, and they get a 3rd rounder in probably the most stacked tight end draft class we've ever seen. So I think it's a move that makes sense from both sides. I don't think the Raiders will even be that upset if Darren Waller does end up playing the whole year. Because I think that they'll be able to take a chance on a tight end with that 3rd round draft pick, or maybe just one of their earlier picks, since they now have later capital to fall back on. And it's a pretty decent draft class. It really, really is. So I really don't think they're that upset about it. And they just signed Jacoby Myers. Hunter Renfrow clashes with that, I guess would be the word. They're both over the middle slot receivers. So to also have that going against Darren Waller didn't make a ton of sense. So now there's not that competition. They'll still have Devontae Adams on the outside. And I mean, they'll bring in a tight end. Foster Moreau is scheduled to be a free agent, but they could still bring him back or just something. They'll figure it out for sure. They're an organization in the NFL, so they figure these things out. But I don't think it's a bad move for either team. I really don't. A lot of people were saying it's a great deal for the Giants. It is if he plays the full year. But even then, I don't think the Raiders will be that upset. I really don't. He's, again, a 31-year-old tight end who hasn't played a full season in 2 years. So it doesn't matter how good you are producing when you're playing. It's, again, a crowded core, and it's a big risk. It really is. So I think a 3rd rounder is totally fair. totally acceptable. And I think that that's a good deal for both sides. I do. And the last signing that I have written down here, it just happened before I went and recorded this. The Lions are signing David Montgomery to a 3-year, $18 million contract. That means that Jamal Williams is gone, probably, right? It has to mean that, which is honestly really surprising to me. But they signed a running back that takes on the same role for 3 years. I think you can kiss Jamal Williams goodbye, which sucks. I know he was loved in that locker room. He was great on Hard Knocks, great personality in the NFL. Fun guy, just set the franchise record for rushing touchdowns in a season. It's honestly crazy that they'd let that kind of guy go and just replace him with a David Montgomery. But I mean, David Montgomery is probably better than Jamal Williams. So it makes sense. It makes sense from a football standpoint, but from a person standpoint, it's a little head scratching. But I get it at the end of the day. What does it mean for DeAndre Swift is the next question. And I think it hurts a little because I think David Montgomery is going to command a little bit more carries than Jamal Williams would. I was definitely, as a DeAndre Swift shareholder, hoping Jamal Williams would re-sign because I'm fine if you're going to vulture touchdowns, if that's going to be your only role, because I didn't think you would get 17 again. But David Montgomery is going to command a little bit bigger of a snap share than Jamal Williams would. And he's a little bit better too. So I think it hurts DeAndre Swift a little bit, but still it also helps in the regard that DeAndre Swift is going to continue to be able to do what he does best, which is just be a pass-catching running back, go into the more explosive type plays and try to break them and try to break big plays and be an explosive running back and not take on as much usage, not take as many hits. So I think it works out for him still in the long run, but definitely limits his upside a tiny bit, just a tad. But I'm not too worried about it. So let me quickly check the Player Profiler Twitter to see if anything crazy has come in. But it looks like the last thing is going to be the David Montgomery news. Other than, looks like there was a D lineman that was signed, but And yeah. I do see I have a question here from Country on the Discord, Chad, in the chat sometimes, asking if he should sell DeAndre Swift. I don't think I would. I don't think I would yet at all. I think his value just took a hit across the community with that kind of signing, so I don't think you're going to be able to get it. I think you just kind of ride DeAndre Swift, to be honest. I think that he'll still be fine for fantasy football purposes, just not as good. But it looks like one more notification came in, and it's another defensive signing. So, yeah, cornerback Byron Murphy to the Vikings. That's a good signing for them. They did just lose a cornerback or two. They lost 2 cornerbacks, so it makes sense that they brought one in. So lastly but not least, before I sign off, I'm going to leave you guys with some players to look out for today. Just a few from wide receiver and running back at least. Juju Smith-Schuster still is not signed. Adam Thielen still is not signed. Odell Beckham, of course. DJ Chark, I think, will be a big one to come in. And then Julio Jones, I think, could be interesting. Jarvis Landry can maybe be interesting. Mecole Hardman, Paris Campbell. I think Paris Campbell, if he lands on a good offense, could be pretty damn good. We've seen that profile. He just hasn't quite panned out on the Colts, but, you put him somewhere good, maybe he will. And then for running backs, Miles Sanders is going to go somewhere. Devin Singletary. I'm thinking he probably resigns with the Bills, but he's probably going to go somewhere. At least, we'll see some news with his name. Damian Harris, Kareem Hunt, Jamal Williams now, Jerick McKinnon, and then the one I'm kind of excited for is seeing if Alexander Mattison will be resigned by the Vikings. I hope that happens for him because of those Dalvin Cook potentially being traded rumors. But yeah, those are kind of the big free agents at wide receiver and running back that are coming up today. And I know that you guys care about those the most as your fantasy football players. And we kind of know what's going on with the rest of the positions, except for maybe like Foster Moreau at tight end. So, man, thank you all for joining me. It looks like we've, hit 30 minutes, which is pretty damn good for the Wake and Take. So thank you all for joining me. You have a fantastic Wednesday. Be sure to follow the Roto Underworld Instagram for some UGA Pro Day news. Be sure to follow the Twitter for all of the free agency news. That's also at Roto Underworld, I'm pretty sure. Yeah. Thanks again for joining. Sorry I wasn't able to engage with your comments. I hope you guys still enjoyed. You have a fantastic, fantastic day.
Hey, you like that video? Be sure to subscribe and activate those alerts so you get notified as soon as new videos drop. And be sure to check out PlayerProfiler.com. We have all the tools for you to dominate every type of fantasy league. We have a draft kit, Dynasty Deluxe, data analysis, DFS Dominator, and don't forget the player rankings to rule them all.